the parable of the sower. And this is taken from Matthew chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verse 1 to verse 23. So Matthew chapter 13, verse 1 to verse 23. And I'm reading today from the King James Version. So if you have your Bible, King James Version, you can open to Matthew chapter 13 from verse 1 to 33. From verse 1 to 23, I'm sorry. So if you observe from your Bible, the whole of the book of Matthew chapter 13 is focused on Jesus teaching his students. The word disciples, the meaning of disciples means students, those who are eager to learn. So Jesus was trying to teach them, and he centered on a topic. His major topic here was the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven. That was his message. So he used about four or five. He used more than five. He used about 6 different parables to teach on the topic of the kingdom of heaven. Parables are stories that are told to hide the truth. The reason is because these are stories where whenever you listen to them, you have to show interest for you to understand. You have to show interest for you to learn more. So what was Jesus doing? Jesus was trying to make the people show interest. So if they show interest to these teachings, then he could explain these messages to them for them to understand. So that was why he used parables first to tell all this, to teach these messages to them. He used stories to tell them so that they would want to show interest. So them showing interest will lead to Jesus explaining more to them. That was what he was doing. So today we're going to center on the parable of the sower. This is a very important topic and a very important parable because Jesus tied all other of his teachings, all other of his parables to this particular one. Because this is what happens every time we preach the message of the kingdom. This is what happens to our spiritual life whenever we listen to the message of the kingdom. So that was why Jesus made it very important. And the secret of getting this message is understanding it. We have to not just hear it, we have to meditate on this message, and we have to understand this message in order for this message to have a great impact in our life, to transform our spiritual life. So this is the message of the kingdom was the only message Jesus preached. Jesus, on his 33 years on earth, he preached only one message, and he used different stories to illustrate and to explain this message. But it's so unfortunate that most of us were not paying attention to the only message that Jesus preached. Most of us don't understand the message. Most of us see it as a story or one of the topics Jesus talked about. So we don't focus on the message of the kingdom of heaven. And that was the only message that Jesus preached. So my aim on this in this session is to make us listen and to make us understand this important message, which will result into transformation of our mind, of our spirit, and of our mindset. Because that's God's purpose. That's God's aim for us. So Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13, I read from verse 1. It says, "On the same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea. And great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got into a boat and sat, and the multitude stood on the shore. Then he spoke many things to them in parable." So this was in a situation where Jesus, a great crowd of people were, going after Jesus, were eager and wanting to listen to him because he was the only one then. He was the only preacher who was making sense, who they could understand the message. So the great gathering of people came to him, wanting to listen to him. So the place was so filled that he had no space to teach them. So he had to stay on a boat on the seashore. So he used the boat as his pulpit. So he stood on the boat and faced the crowd, the multitude. So then he taught them and he told them a story, a parable. Chapter 13 says, "Then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, so this was what he said, behold, which means listen, a sower went out to sow, right? And as he sowed, some seed fell on the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places where they did not have much earth, which means they did not have much soil for the seed. The seed that fell on stony places did not have much soil for the seed to germinate. So they immediately sprung up because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. So this is the second. He said, okay, he gave 4 illustrations on 4 different occasions. He said the first one was the farmer went to sow, right? So the first instance was the first group of seed fell on the roadside, because on the roadside there was no soil for the seed to grow. So the birds of the air came and ate the seed. So that first group of seeds was destroyed. So the second one fell on stony places. Stony places means that it fell on a stony surface where there was no soil for the seed to germinate. So because there was no depth of soil, the sun came out and the seed was scorched and the seed died. So the seed could not grow because they had no roots in them. So the third one, he said, the third group of seed fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. Right? But the fourth one, he said, but others fell on good ground and yielded a crop, which means the fourth one, which was the only successful group, fell on good soil. And after that, they were able to germinate, and they yielded, and they produced. He said they produced 100-fold, some produced 60-fold, and some produced 30. So he went further. Jesus went further to say in chapter 13, verse 9, he said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. There's an exclamation mark there, which means he heard it out. He said it very loud. Whoever has ears to hear, make sure you hear this message. Make sure you understand this message. Why? Because this is the basic of all his messages he's been teaching. He wants us to have an in-depth understanding of this. So you shouldn't just listen to this message. You should go further to understand it, to meditate on it, and to know what he means by this message. So after he spoke that, the disciples came, his students came and said to him, why do you speak to the multitude? Why do you speak to the crowd in parables? Why do you speak to them in story? Why are you not clear to them in your message? So Jesus answered and said to his disciples, the reason he does that was because it has been given. Now he was talking to his disciples. He said, it has been given to you to know the mystery of the kingdom of heaven. But to them, the multitude, those who are out there, it has been given. For whoever has understanding, he was saying those people who not only listens but understands. So he said, whoever both listen and understand, whoever has understanding, to him more will be given. Which means for you to get more of this message, you have to understand it. Not just listen to it, but you have to understand it. And he will have abundance. But whoever does not have understanding, okay, this is the important part. Whoever listens to this message like a casual message of the kingdom, but whoever does not understand the message, even what he has will be taken away from him. Which means the one he heard and he didn't understand, the person heard and never understood, will be taken away from them. This is very important. He said, therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of these people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. But Jesus was also speaking. This was Jesus speaking, and he said, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." So he was talking to the disciples. He said, "You guys are blessed because you guys not just only listen, but you guys understand. Some people look, but they don't see. Some people listen, but they don't understand. But you guys are the ones who not just listen, you guys go further to want to understand what you're listening to. So you guys are blessed. Because for the message of the kingdom of heaven to work in your life personally, you have to understand. You have to show interest that you want to know more. That was what Jesus was trying to tell them. The multitude, they just wanted to hear because it sounded like a story to them. They never wanted to show interest. That was why the message had no impact in their lives. But the disciples showed interest. They went further to want to understand it. So as we hear this message today, let us show interest. Let us carry out our own personal assignment, or I would say, to want to understand this message. Let us do our own research. Let us make sure that we read, we study more, we meditate on the message of the kingdom of heaven, so that it will have impact in our life, so that it will produce fruit in our life, in our spiritual life. So Jesus went further to say, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desire to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it." So he went further. Now Jesus is about to explain the meaning of the message of the sower, the parable of the sower that he spoke to the multitude. Now this is remember, his disciples called him aside so they could understand. So he explained it to the disciples, but to the crowd, to the multitude, he just spoke it to them. So he went further to explain it to the disciples. Now he's about to explain it. He said in verse 18, chapter 13, verse 18, he said, "Therefore, hear the parable of the sower. When anyone," this is Jesus speaking right now. He said, "When anyone hears the word of the kingdom, when anyone hears the message of the kingdom and does not understand it, then Satan himself comes quickly and snatches away what was sown in their heart." What is Jesus saying? In order for Satan not to snatch away the message of the kingdom, which is like a seed that is sown in your spirit, in your heart, in order for Satan not to snatch away it, you have to understand it. So you just listening to it, it sounds like a good story to you, and you not understanding it. That is when Satan comes to remove that which you already took in. Remember, we're dealing with spirit right here. It's a spiritual issue. Satan is a spirit, right? The message of the kingdom is like a seed sowed in our spirit. So when that seed is being sowed, when we hear the message of the kingdom, we have to go further to understand it, to study more on it. Otherwise, if we don't do that, Satan comes to take away, to remove what we heard, because we don't show interest in going further to understand it. That's what Jesus was trying to say here. So he said, "Then the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is he who received seeds by the wayside." So you remember he gave a 4 illustrations of the seed that was sown and fell on the wayside and the birds came to eat it. The second group of seed were the ones that was sown and they fell on the stony places, but they had no much soil. So they grew a short while, but they died away because the sun came and scorched them because they had no soil. The third group of seed was the ones that fell on